Hey guys, welcome back. So in the last video, the sped up one, if you watched the whole thing, you would have noticed that Maya crashed and kind of ruined my whole thing, and I kind of got pissed. So I did this off screen after that, for the purpose because I just didn't know how long it would take me. Not to mention that I wanted to try some different workflows. What I was doing on that video, by the way, I wouldn't recommend you did it unless that's the type of workflow that you want. For example, I was selecting edges. I wanted to show you that I basically wanted to make some emphasis on this menu here. So in that case, I was basically selecting these vertices, right? I wanted to select a vertex loop, and I would go into edge mode, and then I would select a loop and then go ahead into vertices and convert to vertex. It's a very inefficient way of doing it, but I wanted to make sure that to drive the point in that it's an entirely valid way of working if you're comfortable with it. Okay, so you could say that obviously in the case of a vertex, you really don't need this because you can grab one and then click on the second one. But you could maybe grab two vertices, or maybe you could just grow this selection, for example, like this, and you have another set. Or you could maybe grow your selection and then convert them to faces, or you could convert to containing faces, and then you can convert to let's say you can convert to the edge perimeter, which is just the sides, or maybe all of the edges inside, right? It's a valid way of working. In my case, I really don't find this as intuitive because it requires a lot of jumps in order to achieve what you want. Like if I had to select these edges, maybe I would select these faces and then grab the edge, convert to edges, but rarely, very rarely would I go and get something like a vertex loop and then grow that selection and convert that into faces, and then grow that again, or convert it into edges, or the edge perimeter and grow that and back into vertices, that kind of jazz. Obviously, you've got different setups like edge ring utilities. You can collapse stuff, which this is obviously I selected it badly, but you don't want to do that. But in reality, you got loads of options with your control right mouse button, because I haven't used this enough. If I actually select this, I haven't used this enough, and really I think you should just give it a shot, because you've got all these like edge ring, edge loops. I really don't know how about what they do that much. Like this is to an edge loop, for example. This is nice, but the edge ring, no idea what it is. Give it a shot, check it out on your own. Maybe you'll find it useful, maybe you don't. Obviously there's so much stuff about Maya that I'm not ashamed to say that there's something I don't know, especially if I don't use it. But that being said, now we need to talk about the actual skin painting, weight painting method. First of all, you would have noticed that I tried using, now I used a different method than that, but this is the one I really fancy. I really want to get used to it, but I just can't get it right. That's the pro type method, where, and it makes a lot of sense, right? You select a influence, which is an object, right? A joint. You select a joint, and then you select a loop, and then you say, first of all, you zero everything out. If you remember, I zeroed everything out and started manually typing in values with the replace mode in my skin paint tool, which meaning it was an absolute value that I was giving, right, to the object, which is fine. Let me just turn on the, I like this better. So if we take a look over here, okay, if we take a look over here, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 edge loops. Yeah, we got 4 edge loops, and in order for that to happen, in order for us to have a believable deformation between the two, we would need to actually define some rules. So I would go ahead and grab the first one and say this ring has 100% influence taken from this joint, the center joint, right? Then this ring over here takes 75% influence from this joint's movement and 25 from this joint, and then 50-50 split in between, then 25 here, another one which I don't have right now, because I actually, when I added it in the previous video, I forgot that you actually can't do that when the skin mesh is bound, and I will talk about this in a minute, right? And obviously there's 25 over here and 75 on this side, and then 0 from here and 100 on here. Problem with this is that you really need to know what exactly you're going to be doing, because first of all, you're overriding the entire binding process. You're doing this manually, okay? You're binding your skin manually. The only thing you've done is basically tell Maya that this skeleton will influence this mesh somehow, and then you define this manually. And this is what all the pros do, a lot of the pros do anyway. I had to do it the noob way, the old-fashioned, the newbie way, which is essentially use very small values and paint your skin. So in this case, as you can see here, I focus obviously only on the right side. This is my default binding, and then I just use very small values. We go into paint mode over here. I was simply using something like value 0.1, and then I was painting it. One more thing, by the way, I do believe that this tool set is going to be replaced by 2019 or somewhere else, because 2018 introduces new UV, like an entirely new UV setup. I mean, the tools are the same. It's just like it integrated better with the modeling toolkit and all that. And the symmetry is global now. I believe it will work. I think it will work with the paint tool. I haven't downloaded it. There isn't, like, 2018 LT is not available yet. But I do think this is a quite archaic system, because there's no layers, nothing like that. Very hard to have some proxy. And we talk about proxies later and the reason why they're so important. For example, things like, holding down control, right? And if you have 0.1 over here and you hold down control and it says invert, you might think that you will actually be subtracting, because that's what everything else does, right? Shift, click, add something to your selection, control, clicking on top of the same thing removes it from your selection. Like, for example, edges, right? You hit control, click over an edge, it's going to deselect it. You shift over an edge, it will select it. So everything, everywhere in Maya, control is always about inverting whatever it is you're doing, plus to minus. In this case, it actually does not go into minus, but goes ahead and inverts your actual value. So instead of painting with 0.2 right now, which I am, so if I go ahead and do this at 0.1, and if you notice that I'm painting a very small value, now obviously this first joint has no business talking to these influences over here. But if I go ahead and control and invert this, I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger and invert this, and you will see that I am actually having huge influences instead of taking something away. And that's because Maya normalizes the weights, and that means that at any given point, a particular vertex has 3 influences. Remember, I've bound it with 3 maximum influences. So basically, this one vertex takes information from 3 joints as it is right now, meaning that if I increase the influence of this joint over this vertex over here, these 2 will lose some of it. I believe I set it up to be based on distance, so there's that. So that's how it's going to be calculated, but you can never have something that has more than 100% influence from altogether. They all combine to 1. That's why it's a normalized value. Problem with it is, for example, is that magnitude does not work very well. In fact, it doesn't work at all. Like holding down M does not increase the value or decrease it, even if you have different minimums and maximums. So that doesn't really help me in my case at all. Obviously, you can work with your own values. Let's say you can want maximum of 100, right? And you work with 100 instead of with decimals, and then you can normalize, and it's going to give you the basically normalize whatever values you have there. It's going to basically divide over them. So there's that. And one last thing I wanted to talk about before we go further is the fact that you need some proxies. Like, let's say in this case, right? And that's the reason I'm doing this video, by the way, is because we need some proxies to get this done. In other words, if I want to add, okay, yeah, I had to actually revert back because I was doing something. So if I want to add an edge loop over here, okay, I need to actually detach this, right? I need to detach this, and that is because I cannot obviously add anything. Not to mention that I can't really edit the UVs when the mesh is like this, when it's bound. So in order to do that, I need to actually create another object, and that's an issue because I don't have another object, right? Well, here's the thing. I'm gonna just duplicate this one, and then we're gonna move it to the side and do our modifications. Then we're gonna rebind it. Very simple. The only difference is that we're gonna keep the skin weights currently bound here, and for that we need to symmetrize them. And if you notice over here, there's obviously a difference between our sides, and not to mention that actually we have a severe lack of like, this is very bad geometry. Okay, this is ridiculous geometry, not good at all, and I'm not happy with this at all. It's unacceptable. Okay, and you always want to strive to something that's acceptable. Currently, this is 1300 polygons, which is very, very low. And I mean 1300 polygons, you'd see something like a mug made out of it. I mean, maybe a little bit more, but this is very easy on the computer. So we can definitely afford some more polygons, right? Because take a look, you only got like 1300 verts. So what I'm going to do right now is essentially, right, detach this thing. Before that, we got to mirror stuff across it. So I'm going to pop off my skin cluster, my skinning menu set over here. And first, I'm going to prune all of my small weights, which is essentially going to zero out everything that's below 0.01, and I'm going to prune those. It's not going to have a visible impact, but it's going to clean it up a little bit, not that it matters. I just like to have it nice and tidy. After that, actually, I do think I had to go into paint mode to prune them, but it doesn't matter. It's not a big deal, because I doubt I have something that's lower than that in terms of value. What we want is to mirror my vertex weights across a particular axis. In my situation, I would like to mirror them across this axis first, because I need to have them symmetrized. If you take a look over here, there's actually a difference. I'm going to turn this off. There is actually a difference in my skin weights from each side. So I want to go from this side, and then I'm going to go and transfer them to that side over here. And while I'm at it, I might as well select the geometry and just prune all my small weights. Well, I didn't do anything because I actually don't have any small weights, so that's nice. So let's go ahead and mirror this stuff, shall we? Let's take a look at the other joints. Very simple, very nice indeed. We got this, and that. Very good. Whenever you're working with this, by the way, whenever you're painting, make sure that you lock the joints that you don't need access to. So because I'm working with maximum influences of 3, I'm basically working in pairs of 3. So at any given time, I have 3 joints at maximum opened up. So either 2 or 3 or maybe even 1 opened up, so that I can work on isolate particular vertices. Okay, and that's what you want to be doing as well. You don't want to be setting it up and then realizing that, oh gee, I messed up some other skin weights. And because you're doing this, always use low values. Like I already said, I'm not a specialist at this, so my approach to actually manually bind everything did not work out quite that well. And always go with add, don't go with replace, because replace is an absolute, and Maya doesn't know where to split the difference unless you lock everything, and just like you lock literally everything, and then just set up for every vertex a particular value. If you are lucky enough to possess the actual Maya, in which case you probably don't need to view this video, because you're most likely a student or professional and you don't need my information. They have a component editor which is very nifty, which unfortunately misses and is lacking in Maya LT, at least as of 2017, and the fact that it allows you to select every vertex that you have and then manually type in its value, and it basically shows you a grid, much like the dope sheet. Shows you a grid where your vertices are on the top and then your joints are at the bottom, on the left. So you can grab all your vertices, or maybe it's the opposite, I don't know. Basically it's a grid, okay? It's a table with joints versus vertices, and then you can essentially write down the values that you need them to have, which is very nice for these high-level operations that just give you a baseline of what you can do afterwards. This is very labor-intensive, as you've probably noticed last time. It just takes a long time to select a particular vertex edge, and then go back into paint mode and do this for every vertex loop, and then only then you can start actually painting. Okay, so always use small values. Don't try to do something fancy. Like in this case, for example, this doesn't really look doesn't look that good to me. I prefer my previous setup here, so I'm going to use that. And always try to smooth. Right, hold down Shift, make your get a pretty big brush and start smoothing out, because Smoothing is always good, and it's usually the smoothing bit that allows you to, that creates these very big, very small values. So that's the stuff that you will be probably pruning afterwards. Also, make sure to use the hammer weights, hammer skin weights tool. That's very handy. It basically averages the value of the selected vertices against the vertices around it. So that's pretty nice, because usually create like all these artifacts. When you get some weird issue, chances are you can hammer them back together. And ideally, after a skin bind, you almost always want to grab a particular set of vertices, just hammer them back in, so you can work on them. So anyway, that being said, we should probably go ahead and mirror this, because I've been yapping about this for long enough. So let's go ahead and turn my multi-color feedback on again, and I want to select the geometry, which it already is selected, and I will mirror my skin weights. And if I take a look over here, it's currently mirrored across, will mirror across X and Z axis. Now if I go ahead and reset this actually, because I've been playing around with this, it will mirror across first Y and Z. That's the one that we need anyway, because first I want to mirror across X, Z, and Y axis, which is this plane over here, right? In order to symmetrize my object from right to left, and it will go from positive to negative, which is exactly what we want, right? And it's going to take the closest point on surface. In my case, I don't want that because this is a one-to-one. Like, it's completely symmetrical on both sides, so there's nothing. It's not going to happen where there's going to be a vertex. It has to be a vertex on one side, and there isn't. So I'm going to go ahead and choose closest component, and I'm not going to use a closest joint. I'm basically going to use a one-to-one, though in this case it shouldn't really matter because you know, I mean, because we're using the same skeleton, right? And then obviously normalize, that's very dependent. In other words, well, how should I say this? It should be they should be normalized as it is, okay? Because if you're using interactive mode, this wouldn't really matter. You can turn it on for, you know, just to be safe, but you know, I don't want to introduce any errors in my case, so I'm not going to do it. And you never know with Maya. So I'm going to mirror these skin weights across. And let's go ahead and just turn this off and take a look at what's going to happen. I'm going to apply this. As you can see, all of my joints here, they have been properly mirrored, but not obviously not across this side. But from the top, if we take a look from the top here, this definitely does give me like an exact mirror across these, right? So what I want to do now is essentially move this across the other side. If I go ahead and do this now, go to central, I'm going to mirror this across the X and Z axis. Now if we take a look here, we want to mirror across this plane over here, right, so that it goes onto this side. So that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm using the exact same settings, and I'm going to mirror this. And now we should have a quite well, much better deformation. So if I leave this now and I'm go ahead and just hide my skeleton here for real quick. So this looks much better in terms of overall deformation, but we still have these sharp edges here, and this looks like crap to me, really. There's obviously some issues over here with the whole setup. It just doesn't look good, okay? And this is where we come to the need of a proxy, meaning that you need to have, and I've already named this as a proxy, by the way, currently, because we will use this as a proxy. So what does that mean? Well, a proxy in any language means that it's an intermediate object, okay? It will have an effect upon another, which is a target, but you will work on it, and by some way, in some situation, you will have an effect on the other object. So if I go ahead and unbind the skin, which I will have to do, right? Because, like I said, we actually don't have, we cannot work on a bound mesh. And I'm going to keep my skeleton on here because I want to do something. I want to make sure about something before I go ahead and unbind this. I'm just going to go ahead and take a look at where exactly maybe I'm going to need a little bit more detail. So in my case, I'm going to need somewhere maybe like a I don't know, maybe an edge loop over here, and then over here, then maybe one over here. I really don't need, maybe one just past the third joint here, but nothing much after that. I mean, this looks pretty good as it is, you know. So this is my cutoff point. So I really need on the first couple of edges just to add a little bit, a few more edge loops. I like to add edge loops with the multi-cut tool, but it's obviously possible to do so with other tools. And for some reason I have a visibility on, which I don't need. I don't know why it's keyed in actually. Anyway, so this is, I've taken a look at what I've got here, and I'm gonna basically unbind the skin by keeping the history. This is on the default. Obviously you can delete it or you can bake it in. Baking in history does not, it was my mistake the first time when I did this, and I hope you don't do the same mistake yourself. Baking your history will make sure that the shape remains the same. So if I go ahead and unbind this in this case, like so, and if I keep the history on, it will go back down. But if I go ahead and bake this, it will stay the same, but it will delete the history. So you know, depending on what you want to do, right? Don't go ahead and you know, if you want to deform your mesh and just keep it like that, then yeah. Otherwise, don't. So I'm gonna go ahead and unbind the skin again. I'm gonna keep the history, press apply, close this, and currently we have basically an object. Okay, now we can work with it. So I'm gonna go ahead and duplicate this thing. For some reason, my outliner is really big, fat. I kind of thought I could make it smaller. Anyway, let's go ahead and duplicate this thing. So I'm going to duplicate. Now, obviously, you can go ahead and duplicate special if you really want. And when you duplicate special, you can, you know, give it a couple of extra properties, right? Extra attributes. But in my case, I just need to have a separate mesh. I'm going to Control D to duplicate it. And I'm going to move my original proxy out of the way. I believe I do have, yes, this is my original proxy. And this is going to be just my low worm, okay? So this is my proxy, this is my low. Now, first of all, never delete your proxy because you never know when you might need it. And why do you need a proxy? Let's go ahead and just imagine a world for a second where we have an object that has this many faces on. How does that look like to you? Would you like to go ahead and select every single vertex here and then go ahead and, oh, I don't know, go ahead and set up influences for each vertex and then go ahead and paint this stuff? You might say that, well, this is much different than sculpting. Yeah, it isn't much different than sculpting, but it requires much more precision than sculpting does. So a lot of the time you'll find yourself going into your, which object mode here, but it would be like on this side, which is be your selection mode, and you would go ahead and start selecting different vertices, hammering them in, grabbing all these, you know, having all these different operations that you need to perform. And because you'll be working with small values, look, I had trouble with small values on this, okay? If I were to work on something like this, it would be a nightmare, especially if you mess up your weights and for some strange reason it just bugs out on you. You have to hammer them back in. You got to select all these weights and it's just all warped. Look, it's not nice, okay? In many situations, almost always is better. Even if someone gives you a mesh and it looks like this, you almost always want to invest some time to create a low poly version of that mesh just so that you can paint the skin weights on that and then transfer them over onto a higher poly mesh. Now obviously we won't be using this because this is ridiculously heavy, even though it's like currently it's 15,000 edges, so it's like only 7,300 polygons. And if we maximize this onto the other side and we flip it, it would be 14,600 polygons, which is acceptable for a character level of detail. Although, because this is a small character, and it's like we don't need that many faces, all right? That's my point. So I'm going to hide this back again, and I want to use this. So I'm just going to unhide my low version here. Okay, I got this. So I'm going to use this. Okay, I'm going to use this as a. I'm just going to save, by the way. I'm going to use this as a proxy over here. So if we go ahead and select our paint skin weights tool, notice that this object has skin weights. Okay, and if I go ahead and select this object has no skin weights, none. And it's not even bound, which is fine, which is what we want. So I'm going to go ahead and bind this now. But before that, we need to perform some operations on it. So I'm going to isolate it, focus on it, and then we will get to work. I don't need this layer for now. I really don't need this as well, so I have some more space to work with. Now I'm going to perform some basic operations. First of all, remember that we had our issues here on this side. So if I want to go ahead and add some stuff, I'm going to have to do so. And this is where you want to preserve your UVs if you have some texturing. So actually, let's do this. Let's have a doubling down type episode where I'm going to go ahead and assign a material, which I don't have, so I'm going to have to assign a new material, which would be a Fong. And if I go ahead into the Fong here, and I'm going to grab my wood, which, if you remember correctly, was in the images folder, textures, wood. And there it is. So I'm going to assign this, and I'm going to go into shaded mode to view my wood. Now, obviously, this is not a woodworm. Woodworm. say woodworm 1,000 times. No, 100 times. 10 times fast. Woodworm. Yeah, whatever. Never mind. I'm getting off topic here. Okay, so what we want is to preserve our UVs, because currently, if we take a look at our UV set here, we have it laid out nice and smooth. So we have a solid, like a good distribution of our of our texture. Now, obviously, this is not the texture that you need because it's going on, wrong side. We probably would want the texture going this way. We could always flip the texture, all right? That's not a big issue. We don't want to. You could flip the UVs, but ideally, you want to, like I said, conform the texture to your UVs instead of vice versa. All right, so keep your UVs a priority. Anyway, let's say we want to move something. So if I go ahead and move this, let's say I grab this object here and I go into vertex mode and grab this vertex here and I start moving it. Notice that I am creating a, it's not going too well for me, is it? So even if I use my soft select, you might say, well, maybe just soft select. I'm going to slide this left and I'm warping this. It is a huge disaster. Like, I mean, all of my paint work just slides off. Now, let's just be clear about this. We're not going to be doing any texturing in Maya, but there are many cases when you will be working on a textured file, or you just want to take a look at how a texture is going to look onto something. Ideally, though, you only want to preserve your UVs when you have a texture. There's no need to preserve your UVs if you don't have a texture, because you will conform the texture to your UVs later. Although once you already have done so, then it's another story entirely. So let's go ahead and select my move tool. And I'm going to just deselect my transform constraints here so that I can move it anywhere I want. And even if I move it up or down, because I've been sliding it so far, it just creates a huge amount of problems. And even if I go ahead, let's say the only time it's not going to create an issue for me when I create more is when I create more edges, right? So if I go ahead and select my multi-cut tool and I just add an edge, and I'm just going to create I'm going to turn on the edge flow here. I'm going to exit this and go into symmetry mode. So we got both of these sides selected. And then I'm going to go back into my tool and just add a couple of edges. Notice that adding edges is not a big deal here. Okay, adding edges does not create an issue, but there is an issue when you start moving or transforming or extruding stuff. Because let's say I extrude this and I just go ahead and extrude this in. All right, notice, look what's happening. So in this case, if you want to extrude something, if you really want to add some more detail here, you got to go into your bonus tools and then go into your modeling. And I do believe it is possible to extrude with UVs. You can scale the UVs, preserve the UVs, right? You can preserve UVs by sliding a loop, by sliding your edges. Now, not every operation can preserve your UVs. So make sure you do this. Make sure you got your model done, all right, before you texture it. And even if you texture it, sometimes it might be easier to just retexture it later down the line, okay? So I just wanted to show you that it is possible. Let's say in the Move tool, and I just click on Preserve UVs here, then I can slide this. Well, I need to turn on the surface slide, the edge slide. Where is it? The edge slide here, and then I can go ahead and just slide this up and down. For some reason, I have two edges. No, there's actually, I'm getting an error here. I can't move anything, which is weird. I should be able to do so. Okay, it's moving on this side, but for some reason it's not moving on this side. So I need to delete the history on this, and might as well. Why not? There you go. I deleted my history. I'm actually going to delete all the history, everything deleted. And now I should be able to move this edge here. No? Oh, because I'm preserving my UVs. Yes, of course. Now if I don't, yes. For some reason though, I seem to have too many edges. It's very strange. I kind of thought that I didn't know I had some rogue edges here. Really, I didn't. So I need to go ahead and select, and let's take a look here. How many of these cut edges do I have? These ones seem to be fine. These ones seem to be fine. So I need to merge these. I need to collapse these edges and merge these together. Merge edges. Oh Jesus! No! 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 Just merge border edges. Oh no! This is not going to create. This is going to create a big issue actually. Here, yeah. Well, I probably need to just recopy this. Because if I collapse them, they will actually collapse on both sides. So I need to target weld them maybe. This way, yeah, but this creates other issues. Yeah, I'm just gonna delete this. I was trying to play around with this, and then I ended up screwing it over. But you get my point, right? If you wanna move something, always just preserve the UVs. Same thing goes for rotate, right? Control Shift, preserve UVs, or preserve geometry. You got all these things here. Obviously, they're also available from your tool menu, tool options over here. You got your symmetry and your where's the preserve the UVs now? This is my selection tool. No, no, no. I want the rotation tool. There we go. So you've got your preserve UVs, I believe. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? There you go. Preserve UVs, tweak mode, all that jazz. Make sure to enable it if you need to preserve your UVs. That being said, let's just delete this thing and unhide my objects and duplicate this and zero this out, the new object. And then let me just make sure that we don't have any paint modes, many skin weights. Yes, we don't. I'm going to isolate this. Oops. I'm going to isolate this thing again, and we're going to work on it now. So go ahead and grab the multi-cut tool. Obviously, you can insert edge loops, but this is with the old settings where I had like tons of edge loops. So I really don't need that. I don't need to do that. So I'm going to basically just grab my multi-cut tool, which is much more, I believe, robust, and I will start inserting some edge loops. So there's one in the beginning. I remember I needed one. And then I need another one here, and then maybe actually two here, or just the one, maybe just the one. Let me go ahead and just look at it from the side. I need to isolate this. For crying out loud, it didn't isolate on every viewport, and I can't be arsed to select this stuff again. So I'm currently having some, this looks sort of okay. If I take a look at my skeleton, yeah, I do think that this looks sort of okay. I have my symmetry on, so that's not a big issue. A little bit of a, maybe I need a little bit, like one more, maybe one more over here. Now I've increased the topology, the geometry here quite a lot, but that's because this is the part where it's going to receive the most amount of deformation. I really don't need that many loops and polygons on this side, because let's face it, you're not going to have that much of an issue. That being said, I need to somehow now set up my shading. In other words, tell Maya, not shading, but basically how light is going to be calculated. And I need to say where my, which edges are going to be soft and which are going to be hard. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert this selection to edges. And I'm going to select to all contained edges. Notice, by the way, if we go ahead and go into edge perimeter, there's nothing to go into because we don't have a perimeter. So that's why you want to go and select your, edges, or the contained edges, by the way, can have as well. It's going to give you the same result. So I want to go ahead and basically tell it that, I'm going to hide my skeleton, by the way, and tell it that I want these to be soft edges. I'm going to soften them. That means that they will bounce light. Notice the difference, right? Notice the difference? That's because it's being light is being calculated differently. There's no difference in shape right now. That's basically only explains how my object is going to be represented when light hits it, okay? So there's that. Now that I have these, and these are all nice and soft, I actually have an issue because not all of my edges are soft, right? I actually have these over here, and like this needs to be a hard edge, so I need to harden it. And I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing and say harden edge. What did I just do? Oops, no. Harden edge, there we go. And I don't want to toggle my soft edge display. These are all softs, which is nice, right? And this is a hard one, which is also nice. So my soft edges are like this with all these. I'm going to turn off this display though. I don't like it. So these are all normal edges, and this is my hard, sharp edge. As you can see, it's very sharp compared to the others. So I'm going to select this again. Select this again, right? And just get rid of this as well. And then select this. Yeah, good, very good. So now I'm going to go ahead and crease these. I'm going to max the crease out because I want this to be as sharp a crease as possible. So I believe this is the maximum amount of modifications that I'm going to do. I'm going to double check, just turn off the symmetry here real quick. Turn off the symmetry, and I'm going to double check my UV sets, my UV set, so to speak, just to see that it's all correctly laid out. Now, in this case, you might say, well, is this UV set still working for you? Yes, it probably does, for the small reason that I don't have that much stuff to pack into it. Not to mention the fact that if I really wanted to, I could just bloat it up, right? I could just cut it in half on the sides. And because it's symmetrical, I could only use one side, I suppose, but it would be difficult to paint over it, so I could just maybe have this bloated a little bit bigger. Or, look, you really don't want to have diagonal stuff, but it's entirely possible to have diagonal stuff. It doesn't matter how this thing is set up. So I can definitely go ahead and rotate this and let it be diagonal. Because like I said, it's not skinned right now, and it's not going to be, it's not textured right now. So anything I texture, because I'll be doing it in Painter, and I'll be actually painting onto the mesh, it'll be up to Painter's job to basically match whatever I'm doing and put it onto the UVs. So in reality, I don't need to give two shits about this. The only reason I do this is because in your case, you might have a person who's working with Photoshop, and they will actually have to do and match these linears, right? Because if you see a picture and you know that only this part of the picture will have an effect on the particular part on the mesh, on the target mesh, then you really have problems, right? And it's going to be very difficult to not get it to work. So I'm going to leave it just nice and simple. It's obviously possible later to modify this and using the same method. So you can copy these attributes, right? You can go ahead and I believe just regular mesh. Just you can transfer attributes, and in the attributes here you can actually transfer the UVs, which is fine. You can transfer the UVs and just transfer the whole thing, right? So that's very nice. Along other things, you can transfer these as well. But anyway, let's forget about the UVs for now. I think I was very clear on that, how to and when to work with this. So now that we have our object, we need to simply delete the history, which I will do, and that's my history deleted. Even probably the deformer history, not that I have any, but just to be sure. And now I'm going to rebind this. So let's go ahead and show my skeleton. Grab my skeleton, and I'm going to go into my skin menu, and I'm going to bind this. Let's go ahead and take a look here real quick again. Join hierarchy, geodesic voxel, all this stuff is going to be remaining the same. 3 of maximum influences, and I'm going to just click bind skin. I want to validate this. It will take some time. I'm going to take a sip from my trusty monster can. Delicious. The doctor. Okay, and this is done just on time. So if I go ahead and look at this now, we've got 3,200 edges and essentially 1,600 polygons. Not that big of an increase, but compared to 1,300 polygons, there's definitely an increase in fidelity and deformation. Let's go ahead and take a look what we've got here now. If I go ahead and, okay, I got it, dude. Freaking out. So if I go ahead and move it now, notice my deformation is a joke because these new ones, they do serve a purpose, but they're not that good. They're not that good on me, right? Look at how big of a bell curve. Well, it's not really a bell curve. It turns into a freaking tower curve at this stage. We don't want that, right? This is not a digital signal. Right, we want to have a nice sinus-like curve. Okay, so what we're gonna do now is basically copy our skin weights over. So let me go ahead and pop off my skin weight menu. And I'm going to grab my source. This is the source skin. Remember, we've got all the nice skin weights over here. So this is all nice and dandy, nice and set up. And when I transfer this over, because this doesn't have an identical topology, anything that doesn't fit will be basically average between the others. So if I have a skin over here, if I have an edge loop over here, which does not exist on this mesh, but exists on this mesh, it will basically take the average values between it. We'll just fit it in, right? Which is very, very nice. You don't technically you don't even need to use the regular bind here. I just do this just in case, you know, something goes wrong and I have like some value somewhere. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is exit this tool, select my target object, and I'm going to go ahead and copy my skin weights. I'm going to go over the menus like so. I'm going to reset this because I have tested this before just to be sure that it works. Right, we've got the closest point on surface, the raycast, the UV space, and the closest component. Now in our case, we want the closest point on surface. You don't want the closest component because the closest component may be on a different spot entirely. If we take a look at here, and maybe we should x-ray this, but I'm just going to give you like a rough example here. Notice that we've got 1, 2, 3. Now this is obviously, there's obviously a difference in perspective because right now our camera is slightly tilted onto one side. You're not actually almost always looking at a perspective, but if you think about this, something like that would be sort of okay. Now I have aligned, notice how many more edges we have on this side, and now how are you going to basically distribute your weights, right? Because this edge is sort of in the middle, but then you got, you know, some over here. How are they going to work compared to these weights over here? So what you want is to have the closest point on surface, meaning that, you know, if this was inside this or this was outside of that, and you just see, you know, compare the two surfaces and grab the point. As for joints, you need 1-to-1 in this case because, like I said, we've got exactly the same skeleton which was available here. Obviously, we don't need the closest bone or joint or anything like that. You can even have a label or a setup or an actual name, which you need to pick after that, I believe. But we're going to use 1-to-1 because we have the same names. Sorry, the same skeleton, the identical, and we're going to click apply. So let's see what happened now. This is a much better deformation. There's still a little bit leftover work to do. Maybe I could go ahead and just modify this later. Actually, we are missing something. This doesn't look that good. If I go ahead and use the closest component, then let's see what happens. See what happens? That's when you have, because we have more components than we actually did before. So if I use UV space, still have a lot of errors here on one side, but on this side it looks sort of okay. So I'm gonna basically go back and I'm gonna use, what about raycast? Let's see what raycast is gonna do. Funnily enough, raycast actually gives me the most accurate result for some reason. What if we use closest point? Actually, wait, I need to be here. Closest point. No, closest point gets a better job. So closest point is the best one. So I'm going to normalize these actually. Just copy these, normalize them. And yeah, as you can see, I do have an issue. Maybe I forgot to, you know, square them up. But it doesn't look that good. So I'm going to need to essentially go ahead and symmetrize this again. But that's not a big deal because, like I said, as long as one side is fine, the other sides are easy to perform. Now, obviously, I will probably go ahead and play around with this a little bit more because there are some things that I want to do. In this case, actually, I might want to go ahead and add a couple of these joints here. So, sorry, a couple of edge loops. So, as it is right now, I'm going to select this, go into my multi-cut tool, and I'm just gonna add another joint over here like this. Actually, I need to go ahead and turn my symmetry on, and now I'm gonna add another edge loop over here, so this just looks a little bit better to me, and maybe even one more over here, just so that we get a good enough deformation. Maybe one more over here, like so, and like so. This looks a little bit better. Yeah, this looks much better. So what I'm going to do now, because this doesn't really matter in my case, I'm going to go ahead and unbind this again and rebind this. So I'm going to go back to here, unbind the skin. I'm going to delete all the history for this one because I'm going to copy back over. I'm going to detach the skin. If I select the object, actually, nice. I'm going to detach the skin, and I'm just going to go into edge mode, and I'm going to see I want to see which edges are not soft. All of them are soft, which is good. The ones that I added are actually soft. I'm happy with that. And I'm going to select my object now. I'm going to delete its history, including its deformer twist history, the whole thing, right? And now I'm going to do the same thing where I'm going to just click this and bind it. It's going to run through some calculations. Not that I really need it, but you know, better safe than sorry. So now that I've added some extra geometry, let's see what the story is, how it's going to work, how it's going to perform. Maybe we'll get a much better result this time. We'll see. So I'm going to select my source, my target. I'm going to copy my skin weights over, and I'm going to see what the result is after I turn off my symmetry and remove my soft edge display off. For crying out loud, not like this. There we go. And let's see, this looks pretty good. So the only thing left right now is to copy my weights over. I'm going to mirror them over I'm actually going to use my previous settings, so I'm going to mirror my skin weights. This looks much better now. But we do have some issues over here. I will probably play around with these with the painter. I'll just paint these off. Maybe I could just go ahead and do this right now. So lower this and grab a respectable value of 0.1 and just grab a particular maybe grab a particular object here. So grab this joint. I need to lock these joints. Second one is going to be responding mostly to this. Actually, no, I need the third one to be grabbing the most here. And just grab this. No, maybe average this out. Now, which joint should be the one grabbing this most? Maybe central. Central will be lifting this up, but 0.1 is a lot. Just a little bit of smoothing, just a tiny bit of smoothing. Something like this. This looks good. And now over here, I need to modify this as well because this is a little bit too strong on this side. So I'm going to grab this. I'm going to make my brush a little bit bigger, and I'm just going to smooth. I'm just going to grab and paint some here. Right. This is looking sharp, very sharp. Now I need to smooth this out. Right, and then maybe smooth it out a little bit on this side over here, like so. Right, smooth, 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 smooth. That's basically what it is, right? You'll play around with these. I believe I should not have gotten this much into here, so I need to add a little bit more on this side. Remember to keep it additive. Keep it on additive and just play around. And whenever you're happy, you can always go ahead and smooth some skin weights. Smooth some vertices. So you can go into select mode and just grab some vertices over here, right? Just maybe this whole loop vertices, and then I still got symmetry on. Jesus Christ. Seriously? Please turn off. And now I'm going to go ahead and select these, perhaps these, and these. And I'm just going to smooth around these objects. I'm going to smooth them based on, just reset the settings. Maybe something like this. Let's see what's going to happen. Click apply. No, click apply. No, click apply. For some reason I can't get this thing to work. I believe it's because I don't have enough iterations, or my value is too high. Maybe I need a lower value. Apply. No. How low of a value I need? Let me just see here. Preview. Okay, this will not actually grab anything. What if I grab it more? More. Okay, well, for some reason this did not work out the way I expected it at all. So, I'll just grab this then, like so. And then I'm going to paint some stuff on it, like this. Go into paint mode and simply paint some of that like this. On these vertices, Just working on them. No, I don't want this side. It's much better like this. So I just need this edge loop over here to be a little bit more prominent, right? If I went ahead and deselected these and went back into paint mode and selected my geometry, would be nice. So now if I smooth everything out for Mr. 2, this looks a little bit better. A little bit better. I could work with this. And obviously I'm only working on this side because I'm gonna just mirror this across, you know. So sort of like this, and then this is not really looking that good to me. So I need to sort of squeeze this in. Let me take a look at the multicolor bit. See, we're lacking another, possibly another loop here, but in reality what I'm going to do is essentially, just take a look here, we've got this. I'm going to go ahead and hammer some skin weights on. So if I go ahead and just paint select a couple of these vertices, I'm just going to hammer them in. A couple of these vertices like this, hammer these suckers in. Now this isn't too good. What about these? It's not much to hammer here now, is it? Select these and just hammer. No, not happy with this at all. What about hammer here? No. What about this? Just deselect everything. Please, can I deselect this? Seriously, the paint select. Jesus, you can't actually remove. You have to go ahead and paint select from here. Oh, this sucks. Where's my paint select? Paint mode. I wanna. How can I? Jesus Christ. Okay, freaking hell. I'll just go with select mode. Much easier. We'll just have soft select on, and just go to vertex mode. And you don't have soft select on. Oh god, the soft select doesn't work on this. Okay, this is starting to get ridiculous. What I'm gonna do essentially right now is leave it the way this is. Okay, just paint a couple of more weights here on my central, for example. I need to deselect these first, and now go into central and paint mode and select my joint, select my geometry. Just paint a little bit more on this side and just smooth this sucker out. And grab this joint, and maybe just 1 point. No. Here. No. Maybe here. That's a little bit too strong. There, something like this. I'm not too happy with this, to be honest, but I just don't want to spend another 3 hours on this video because I think it's been long enough as it is. I think I actually may have gotten it right. I'm actually pretty happy with this. Just the only thing right here is this little vertex, and if I go ahead and select this vertex, just go into selection mode and select this vertex over here, right? And then we go into my paint mode. What's gonna happen if I flood this? No, not this side. What about here? So I need to smooth this ever so slightly with 0 point something. No, too much. There we go. Okay, I got it. Freaking hell. So you have to see, that's when a component editor would be much easier. I do believe it is actually possible to have, no, it's just its positioning, unfortunately. No way. Even if you go into this here, you're not gonna get its deform attributes. No. That's just unfortunate. Well, you can freeze them. That's pretty nice, at least. Anyway, so now that I have some respectable setup here, what I'm going to do is mirror my skin weights across. Now, obviously, this isn't ideal, and I will probably play around with this a little bit more, but it will get, it'll be just fine. It'll get things done for us. So I'm going to mirror this across my XZ axis first, and then I'm going to mirror across the the YZ and then the XZ, and now I have something that sort of looks like this. right? It doesn't look that bad. And notice, by the way, that now that I have smoothed these out, that the like the light here is actually a lot more smoother compared to before. Now imagine how a smooth object will look. Actually, let's not imagine, just turn it on. This is how a smooth object would look like, and a smooth object in this case would have something of this sort of quite a lot, 59,000 edges, 30,000 polygons. This is how 30,000 polygons would look on this. There's still a few issues here, obviously, on this side, on the inside. And I really need to go ahead and just modify this. I can work in this mode, by the way. It's entirely possible to go into Paint Skin Weights and just work with this mode and just go ahead and grab these, for example, and paint some oops, too much. Paint some of these weights here and then see what the result is. And then, you know, if we're happy or not, see what the whole setup is going to look like. As it is right now, it doesn't look that bad. So I need to go ahead and perform this again. So just mirror my skin weights across the XZ axis over here, because I actually don't know if I mirrored this across the YZ axis what's going to happen. Nothing. That's what's going to happen. We're going to get a better deformation. So that's what it is, really, guys. So this is my worm getting moved around. Depending on this painting method, obviously, you can use different setups. But this is my approach, and this is when you really know that you're done, because I'm not going to delete this, by the way, because I'm just going to hide this. This is my proxy. If I screw it up, right, I still have my base mesh, my base model that is available for me. It's also, by the way, another option here. Another option here, I believe, would be, it's a little bit too confusing for me, but you can actually bind you can bind this mesh onto this skeleton over here. I don't remember if it was possible to have two meshes on the same skeleton, but I believe there's nothing actually conflicting with this. Let's go ahead and try, actually. Let's be adventurous here. Let's go ahead and activate my skeleton and try to bind this to the skeleton. What's going to happen? I don't know what's going to happen. So if we bind this, the history is still there, so there's no need. And oh wow, imagine that. It actually bound it. I was not aware that you could do that. That is very nice. So you can now that you know, you can actually go ahead and let's just bind this. And now you can see you can paint on both of your meshes. So if you paint on this mesh, you can simply copy your weights over onto the other mesh once you're done painting. That's very nice. But at least it gives you an example of how different these things are. If I go ahead right now and take a look here, notice the difference in lighting. And that's not because I added more geometry, by the way. That's because I set them up as being as soft and hard edges. If I go ahead and smooth this, notice there's a distinct difference. Look, my smooth model here looks almost exactly the same as my non-smooth model here. And the difference in polygons is going to be huge. This is 44,000 polygons, 22,000 polygons, whereas this is only 1,800. And that's just the polygons, right? Imagine if, obviously I'm not going to smooth this, but the difference is so small that nobody's really going to find out, even if I do. Okay, so maybe I could use a few more edges. What the shit is that in the middle here? Why do we have such a bad deformation here? What's the story? Yeah, I'm gonna have to clean this up a little bit. But at the end of the day, you want to have, see, you always learn something new. I didn't know you could do that. That is so cool. So that solves a few of my issues with this setup here. Actually, notice that I believe there may have been a problem with my mirroring, because as you can see, I'm getting bad deformations here. So perhaps my mirroring didn't work that well, and that's why my model looks so awkward. If I go ahead and take a look here, I'll just paint my skin weights, and I go into my tool settings, and I turn this off. They are identical. Very strange indeed. Why is it then that my mesh does not look that good? Why is it? Let me just see here. It looks identical to me, but there's definitely a difference over here in between these two. So if I go ahead and just leave this, there's one, and then there's the other. here, and here. Yes, I think there is a slight difference. Maybe. I really don't know. I really don't. I probably have to redo this and just see. But like in my eyes, it's the same. So I don't know why there's such a difference between these on both sides. Not to mention, all right. So there's definitely something I should do just to check out what the story is. But you know, like I said, I'm happy that I learned something, and I'm pretty sure you did as well. I was not aware that you could use this method, meaning that right now I could actually completely exclusively work on this object over here, and then when I'm happy with the results over here, just transfer them onto my higher resolution object. But this is my proxy, and I'm happy for it. Okay, all right, guys. I'm just gonna save this real quick. I'm really happy with this. Maybe skin weight painting is not that bad because I can use the proxy. But yeah, that's the reason. You always want to use the proxy. And even if you do UVs, you're gonna use this on this UV, because by the way, if you're gonna add some geometry, okay, make sure to duplicate this thing, right? Duplicate it. Ah, crap, it's still bound. Well, duplicate it and delete its history, I suppose. You have to, oh god, crap, you have to go into the freaking connection manager and go into, where's my, model general managers, hypergraph connections. You have to go into hypergraph connections and, you know, delete some of the connections, or maybe go into your, you know, into these, modes here and delete a couple of these connections, and you know, just make sure that this thing have to go and show these shapes and reveal these other things just so that you can delete it, or you could just unbind this thing before you do that. Okay, so there's my proxy 1, proxy 2. I'm gonna rename this as being my low poly model, which is my low poly for the high poly, and then I got the low proxy, which is my low proxy, which I will unbind without deleting the history, because I almost just did that. Detach. Thank you very much. And now you can, let's say, go ahead and create another object, but this time you can have it a duplicate special, for example. If you duplicate this specially, by the way, I believe it is possible to have it being in a relationship. Group it on the world, but you need it to be duplicate the input graph. Instance. I believe it's possible to instance this. Yeah, there we go. It is possible to instance this. I just don't know why is it grayed out. Yeah, for some reason this just does not. All right, there we go. So instance. I want to have an instance bit, and I'm gonna have a smart transform, which whatever that is, I really don't know. I'm gonna duplicate the special, and now if I go ahead and bind this onto the skeleton. Now I'm just experimenting at this stage. I'm just trying to figure out maybe if this is possible. This will really help out. So bind this skeleton, and I'm going to bind this skin. There we go. Is this bound? This is not bound. There you go. So you've got, look, this is amazing. This is amazing. So you have everything you could ever need. You got the duplicate special, right? This thing still has my skin weights, I believe. Does it? Yes, this thing has the skin weights, just like this one. Obviously, you can't paint on it, but you can actually go ahead and work on this and add geometry onto it. And I believe if you really are creative, maybe you could figure out a way to add the geometry, right? And then essentially have this, instead of having this as the instance, I don't think you can bind this. Can you bind this? This would be so ridiculous if you can bind this. Is this thing bound now? Jeez, is this thing? I think this is bound. No way. Maybe this is bound, maybe it isn't. I'm not sure. Yeah, it isn't bound. It's not possible for this thing to be bound. It's not. It cannot be bound. But anyway, you get the idea, right? You've got loads of options. This got quite cool, but you could actually probably have some a layered approach, or just a much better skin weight painting tool. Even though some people are happy with it, I still think there's definitely room for improvement here. But now, as you can see, you've got loads of options, right? You can work on this. You can work on your proxy. You can duplicate specially your proxy, right? You can work on this. This wouldn't mind extra geometry. I could go ahead and where's my thing? Go ahead and just add some different things, such as where's my thing here? Come on, boy. There we go. And then I can just go ahead and can I please? get my multi-cut tool. Thank you. And then I can just go start adding these little edges, wedges, bridges. Funny thing is, afterwards, oh, did I miss something? I missed something, didn't I? Yeah, we have an issue here. Well, I'm going to delete this anyway, but point is, afterwards, you can just duplicate this regularly. This is now your duplicate model. And this is obviously not going to get deformed. And now you can actually bind this. Now, obviously, you probably have to do this on a bind pose. But I hope you get the idea, right? Infinite possibilities with what you can do. And I'm very happy that I discovered something, actually 2 things that I didn't know about. And that is a nice trick that you could use yourself. I do believe that if you delete all the history on this thing, it will no longer be tied together. Yeah. Which is a little bit unfortunate. But you don't want to do that, because if you delete the history on this, you will delete the history on this as well, because it's instance. Anyway, guys, play around with this. Figure out your whole setup, and then in the next video, I will do like basically speed up the whole animation setup again, and just create some animations. In your case, your task right now would be to finish up your weight painting, and that's what I'm going to do on my end as well. I'm just going to go ahead and just clean up a couple of these things. I'm not very happy. I'm pretty happy, but I'm not. It could be better, right? So I'm going to play this a little bit better, especially now that I got these 2 methods to screw around with, which I have actually, I did not know it was were available to me. So it's a little bit late for me, but at least I found it, or discovered it, or perhaps rediscovered it. I'm pretty sure someone else figured this out before me, even though I am amazing. Anyway, point is, make sure that you have the stressors, which are the most stressful positions. So in my case, this is probably the biggest deformation I'm ever going to have. But in your case, if you have bigger deformations, such as, let's say, someone, lifting, like, I don't know, doing something that requires a big stretch or a huge movement, like someone, a slam dunk, for example. A slam dunk would be, slam dunking would be a very animation intensive type deal, where you got loads of deformations and stretches, and your geometry is going to stretch all over the place. So you want to make sure that you basically put your object in all the maximums, right? Your maximum positions in several layers, several frames, so you can jump between them and see how your object performs and how it will look like at these maximums. And after that, you're going to grab these keyframes, you're going to move them away and see how it will interpolate. Obviously, you can have them moved away before, like I already said. You could have step tangents, but you can move them away and then see how it will interpolate between them. And it could be the basis, it could be the beginning of your animation, your overall animation clips, okay? So in the next video, I will go over the whole animation. I'll maybe clean this up a little bit more. And after that, we will talk about exporting, because we will be completely done with Maya. So yeah, in the next video, I'll animate this and finish up with our geometry, because if you remember correctly, we actually have a whole level here to sort out, right? So on your end, like I said, make sure that your local orientation axes on your joints are aligned correctly. Make sure that you have a proper hierarchy. Make sure that your control rig is properly connected. My control rig, I had some issues with it in the last video. If you've probably noticed that I was scaling this, but for some reason it was only scaling itself, but the scale channel was working still. So I really don't know how and why that was a problem. But then again, my setup, this is probably not the best setup. Like I already said, you really don't want, you want to have something a lot more extensive. But figure out what's the best option for you. You're the puppeteer, so make sure your puppet controls the way you intend it to control. All right, don't go super complicated, but make sure that anything you intend for your puppet, so to speak, is possible. Right, you wouldn't want to be a Pinocchio without having the ability to move your mouth. And after that, set up your control rig and start basically weighting your skin to your bones. And after that, we can actually go ahead and export, okay? So that's what you got to do. Just finish up with all your geometry, finish up with your UVs, finish up with all of that. And then once we're done and we go through the export process, or maybe before that, I'm going to go through the whole pipeline again just to make sure that you understand how this whole thing works. And then we'll jump into Unreal Engine 4 and finally start making our game. Well, technically, we're already making it. Okay, I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.